Hey everybody, it's Michelle and I am here with Arshad and Vicki from Convey Communications. Very excited to talk to them today. They've been doing really cool work amplifying the voices of marginalized people, and I'm super excited to get into this conversation today with you guys. Arshad, do you want to introduce yourself, and then Vicki, and we'll just
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us, Michelle. This is a great opportunity to talk about our work and to talk about your work as well. So my name is Arshad Hasan. And along with Vicki, I'm one of the principal founders of Convey Communications. And we'll talk a lot about our firm and what we do, especially during these times. But I came here through having run a number of progressive organizations in the past. And that's what I bring to this partnership.
Vicki, what do you bring to this?
Me? Who? Me? My name is Vicki Roush. And I'm the comedian of the organization. I bring literally the performative aspect. I'm an actor, singer, comedian, and have been my entire life. And every time people go out to speak, they should think that they're putting on a show, that they're on the stage, and they want to command the attention. And there's techniques and ways to do that, and that's what I'm here to help them do.
I love it. We work with a lot of small businesses where there's two business partners starting a business together, like you two. I've got to say, you two are one of my favorite pairings of all time. Do you want to just tell us how you got together and why you decided to go into business together in the first place?
Yeah, it's a good story. So we met at Netroots Nation years ago. I keep thinking we've known each other forever and ever, but really, maybe it was 2009. Maybe it was. I guess it was a while back. In any case, we met at the biggest progressive annual conference there is, Netroots Nation. And we'd both been going there for years and years. And inevitably, we found ourselves there. But we're also connected through a person. We both had the same mentor. His name was Joel Silberman. Mm-hmm. And he came into Netroots Nation, and he came into the progressive community, actually has a background very similar to Vicki's, from performance, theater, television. And he brought that experience and looked at the Democratic Party and the leaders that we have and saw that we're terrible on camera and we're not great speakers. And the other side has trainings and coaching and everything else, and our side just didn't. Mm-hmm. And so he just decided to bring that experience into it. And so he has trained, he's passed away now, unfortunately, but he has trained people up and down the ticket, the kind of heroes that you see on television and the people that you love and remember. Chances are Joel Silberman was their mentor, and as he was with us. Mm-hmm. So when he passed away, we decided to go in together. We already knew each other, and we thought, well, let's do this. These shoes are too big to fill alone. So come in. Yeah.
So combined forces.
Yeah.
Love that. It's so beautiful. And interesting kind of parallels to our business too, where we thought there's just the other side is getting trained all the time on business, on money. There's a lot of Republican consultants that have MBAs and things like that. And there's just a lot more kind of institutionalized business knowledge. And so I saw those organizations, some of those organizations running very efficiently, and some of our organizations not running quite as efficiently, and said, hey, here's a vacuum where I can kind of step up and train people how to do this right. You guys are saying the same thing. Hey, nobody's paying any attention to doing this. And I love, your specific mission of amplifying marginalized voices. Tell me a little bit more about what's different about working with the kind of clients you work with, and how are you training them differently than somebody that might have had the spotlight on them for a long time?
I'm glad you asked that question, because particularly right now we are in a moment that has really revealed not just sort of the character and the quality of the different lives that we lead as different kinds of Americans, but we've really seen a different kind of leadership emerge. And I think this is a trend that's been happening for a while, but particularly with Black Lives Matter, and even before the current moment with Black Lives Matter and Dreamers and the Sunrise Movement, the progressive world has been seeing a new and different kind of leadership. And that's where we come in. So we aren't just a public communications firm and we help you get, an article in the New York Times or a spot on a TV show. Our specific mission is to work with women, people of color, and LGBTQ folks to lift up their voices. And that can take a lot of different forms. So we work with people so that when they're on stage or in front of a funder or on TV or submitting an op-ed, we make it so their stories shine. We make it so that people listen, like take heed. We want them to be inspirational, because too often I feel like in the left, we have a lot of really good ideas, but the barrier isn't the ideas. The barrier is how do we share that idea with the world? How do we actually get it out there? So our whole sort of mottos, our dual mottos are speak truth to empower and you deserve to be heard. And the reason we're focusing on these groups is because we've heard from the same old voices. And I don't know that those same old voices will give us the kind of leadership and change, at least the kind of urgency that we need, where we already have leaders who have the solutions because they're close to them. So we lift them up. We train them on how to do media work. We train them on public speaking. We train them on how to do, talk to funders, that whole spectrum.
And two, say how to own a room, how to enter and exit, how to come on a stage, how to greet people. Some people just don't have that knowledge, and those are all real skills that need to be learned. So and it's basically charisma, because that's something that can be taught, and it's something that's real, and it's very, very helpful to any leader of any kind in any space.
And you're right, it is kind of particular, right? So when we're talking about these different communities, whether they're African Americans or women or all the different groups that we work with, it's not just that the world isn't used to listening to these voices. It is also the case that a lot of us, in the way that we've just sort of grown up through professional life or even just grown up, have learned maladaptive traits to make ourselves smaller. Yeah. And so when Vicki talks about owning the room, it's doubly important for women, people of color, LGBTQ people to walk up on that stage like everyone is here to listen to them, because that is the truth. But too often we learn through so many different other parts of our life to stay small. And you would think of some of these big leaders that you've seen, some of the new voices that you've heard. Well, we work with them, and that is a true tension that we have to work through, something that we get used to, and being like, well, I don't want to be too big, or I don't want to be too emotional, or I don't want to be too angry, when actually all of these things are things, first of all, that the current voices are allowed to be, and second, these are the things that connect us to our authenticity, and that's how we want people to lead. That's powerful leadership. So when we say communicate in public, we want you to communicate with your whole range of emotions. We want you to communicate with your whole self. And if you are a marginalized person, you have been learning how to sort of mitigate yourself and make yourself smaller, when really that's the opposite of what we want.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important to kind of talk about grabbing your own permission sometimes. When you have a client who has been marginalized in one or multiple intersections and has been basically socialized to sit down and shut up, or that they make people uncomfortable with their emotions or their anger, and they're walking into a room of, all white people if you're Black, all straight people if you're queer like us, right? Like all are mostly men.
Yeah.
If you're a woman, if you're trans, if you're non-binary, how do you kind of talk about overcoming the fear while also acknowledging that people are allowed to kind of keep themselves safe if they need to feel safe? This is something that I wrestle with as well, because get out there, amplify yourself, but also like, I totally understand if you don't want to, and why. Like, where's the line on that for you, and how do you kind of talk through that with your clients?
It's hard, and this is where my experience of being an executive director of different organizations really comes in, I feel like, because you as a leader, it's hard because you feel like you always have to be on. And yeah, that's kind of true, actually. You always have to be on, and maybe you come home and you can relax, or maybe you close the door and in your office and you have a good cry. We've all done that. So it can be really hard when it's sort of like, well, I don't want to feel small. I know I have to be big, but like, this is hard. This is just so hard. We will often, when we first started engagement with a client, it's kind of funny. Now at this point, we're actually used to it. We've not even been around for a year, but we see this pattern over and over again. We'll have a client, they're, an executive director, maybe it's some kind of rising leader, and we will catch all these little ways that they diminish themselves. they'll say, well, I don't know. Well, I think this. And in their speeches and their pitches and their visionary statements, and we'll say, well, why is it that you, like, it sounds like you're really unsure. They're like, what do you mean I'm unsure? Like, you've literally told me that in 3 different parts of your speech. You're looking away when you say this thing. It looks to me that you don't believe what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
When really what I think it is you're just not sure you should be here.
Mm.
And so my approach sometimes is I know what it's like to be in your shoes. And so let me kind of dig in there and see what the real issue is, because I can tell, and so can everybody else, when you're not taking up the space that you deserve. And so people are more apt to dismiss you when they're already apt to dismiss you. So there's no point in this. And so I think it's a process that takes a while. So for our clients that have really short engagements, we do what we can, and it's a little bit more tactical. It's more of a consultation. But for our clients that have deeper engagements, we're able to go through different sets of skills. It ends up, and now a number of people have said this, it's like it's a little bit of a therapy session, as well as a little bit of a media training, or a little bit of a therapy session, as well as helping me with my keynote speech. So there's a lot of having to dig deep. And I got to say, honestly, that's part of what makes this work kind of gratifying too.
Mm-hmm. I feel that too. I mean, there's value in helping someone get past their fear if they want your help to do that, right?
Yeah.
Because we all have fear blocking us from doing anything big worth doing, anything exciting, anything risky. There's going to be fear associated with that. And that's why in business, we're dealing with the same stuff. And we're saying, it's not about not being afraid. We're all afraid.
Yep.
It's about being brave and getting up there. But again, like, if you want to, and you don't have to do this, I'm big on like, make a choice, own your choice. Vicki, what do you think about somebody that's on the fence about whether they want to be on stage or not? Do you kind of tell them, hey, decide or not? Or how do you deal with that?
Well, we try to work through their fears for one thing, and give them techniques to seem less fearful.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they start mastering those techniques so that they seem less fearful, then voila, they are less fearful.
Mm-hmm.
It takes work on their part. Imagine an actor in a Broadway show doing 8 shows a week, right? They come in on Monday night after having Sunday off, and they're fresh and raring to go and ready to get back to work for the week. And by Thursday, they're just not feeling it, but they can draw up their techniques and their talents and still be putting on the best show that they can. And by Saturday night, they're exhausted. Their feet are falling off, all the possible things. You're just done for the week. And they still have the techniques and the skills to bring it all up for that great Saturday night audience. So that's what it is. You just learn skills to get over, to work with those fears, basically. And then the more you practice and the more you realize that the audience is not your enemy and they're not going to eat you, then these fears go away. They start to diminish, and then you become really more comfortable on the stage. And if you're lucky, you crave that sort of communicating, and that's when you become really good at it.
Yeah. Confidence is like a muscle memory. Sort of, if you know the skills, and we also, in addition to skills, we really talk about in the strategies that we talk about, we do a lot of discussion on why. And we find that this is really helpful for our clients. Like, yeah, we're asking you to do this thing, but literally, let me show you what happens to your brain when you do this, or to the audience member's brain when you illustrate your point using a story instead of as opposed to using data. Let me show you this study that actually literally measures blood chemistry. So it's not because people need to have a degree in science to do any kind of like media interview or public speaking. It's because I think if people have an understanding of why we do things the way that we do them, it gives them something sort of grounded. They can build those skills and strategies on a foundation of understanding. And that, I think, helps it really stick. That, and we work with really smart people, so I think people crave like the science.
Sure do.
Yeah.
They crave the challenge sometimes.
Yeah.
Very smart. Yeah.
And I do want to talk about the business aspect of this too. So many parallels between overcoming your fears in public speaking or in communication and in business. How did you two draw on your own skills as speakers, as communicators, when it came to overcoming fears of taking risks in business? Obviously, what you're doing is a risky thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question.
We went to an expert actually, to help us and help us. She and her team did when we decided to enroll in when we were browbeaten into enrolling in impact scaling school. Thankfully, it is so helpful in many ways. So many aha moments that we never even thought of. The same way there's skills. I mean, I have to take in my own way of thinking. There's skills and techniques and all that stuff that you need to build. You know, I can't knit a sweater if I don't know how to purl 4 or whatever the hell it's called. Clearly, I'm not a knitter. But
okay, we're following you.
You're following me. So, and I'm rambling. But yeah, so that's what we did. We went to an expert to help us learn the skills we needed to know.
I promise I didn't pay him to say that, y'all.
No, but it's exactly what we did.
Yeah, you know, because you're talking about like, oh, you know, overcoming fears and everything else and naming them. I remember my first call with you, Michelle, you did that right away. You were like, what is that about? Like, why are you afraid to do this? I'm like, oh, excuse me, I'm not afraid.
Well, maybe.
But yeah, like I have to, you know, I have to really like, it has to be called out sometimes, the things that block you. And unless you call them out, unless you identify them and you put them in their place, you're not really going to get over them. So there's like a parallel there. So it's not like I'm afraid of business, but there's just a lot of concepts that I allowed myself to think that they were foreign and unfamiliar. And so I didn't know them and whatever. I think that by naming that fear, it is actually a fear. I think by naming that, you can kind of confront it and say, you know what? You are in the way and I need you to get out of the way because I'm busy being successful. That's what I need to do. So
yeah. Hey, fear, you can be here, but you can sit over here while I, you know, you can sit in the audience while I get on stage, and that's fine. Like, it's okay.
I still get nervous in some of my big speeches, and like, I'm not somebody who gets nervous very easily, so it doesn't happen very often because I do love speaking. I love a stage. I love a camera, but every now and then I will still get really nervous. And it's like Vicki says, once I get up there, like once I've got that mic clipped on, once the camera is on, or once, you know, they've put me behind a podium, I hate podiums, and I start talking, then it's muscle memory. Then you go. Then you're just, you know, you're going 100 miles an hour, and you're ready. And it's adrenaline. It goes from anxiety to excitement for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think, right, a lot of stress and a lot of fear comes from ambiguity, comes from overwhelm, comes from, I don't exactly know what to do next. And so, you know, you're talking about, well, you call an expert and you put strategies in place and it mitigates, it doesn't, you know, make the fear go away, but at least you say, okay, this is scary, but at least I know the steps that I'm taking and the way to think about it. You're doing the same thing when you're giving somebody techniques for how to communicate better, because I might be afraid to go on stage, right? But then I can say, oh, I remembered I'm supposed to do this warm-up exercise or get in a power pose, or now I'm making shit up, Vicki.
We love that.
You know, and so, right, training to, well, I'm scared, but at least I know what to do. At least I know what experts told me to do, right?
Yeah. And because we're specifically focusing on leaders, like everyone is going in, and because the expectations we put on leaders, just all leaders in general, but then the expectations on top of the hurdles that leaders of color and women and LGBTQ folks have, it's just like on anxiety on top of anxiety on top of anxiety, with a thin veneer of, well, I'm supposed to be a leader. So we really have to get into what is it that's holding you back, or what is it that can make you better. And it's interesting what people will fall back onto. They'll fall back on a thing that's safe, but isn't necessarily like the bold step forward that they need to take. You know, they'll say, they'll open their speech getting into the weeds of something, when we want to say, actually, why don't you open your speech with an illustrative story? Or why don't you open your speech with something about you? Why don't we learn about you? And they're like, oh, it's not about me, it's about this, whatever. I'm like, no, the organization isn't up on stage. You are up on stage. You know, like MSNBC didn't call the 13 million members that are part of your organization. They called you to speak for them. And so we internalize these things, don't even realize their barriers, and allow them to stop us. And sometimes you just need an expert to identify and say, you don't have to do this. You can actually be great if you want.
Right. Or yeah, it's going to be hard, but here's how to do it, and here's how to start to tackle it.
Yeah.
You said something earlier that I want to dig deeper into, because I think, it's important for us to call out and talk about the specific pressures that marginalized people face, right? And we talk about the absence of privilege in this area. One of the things that comes up all the time is, I feel like I have to be representative for all X people. So, if I'm talking, I have to be representative of all, queer women, or all, pansexuals, or whatever, or a Black person saying I'm representing all Black people when I get on the stage. How do you work with that pressure?
Yeah, so that's a hard one, especially if you have multiple identities, right? Like, I have to somehow represent all South Asians and gay people, and I can't, we're not a monolith, and I am unique in my own way. So leaders feel that kind of thing all the time. And on top of their own identities, which they have to wrestle with, is that they really actually have in their job description to represent the organization on top of everything else. So I think what sometimes people do is they'll kind of push it away, or they'll defer it a little bit. They'll say, well, it's not about me, it's this thing. And so we really do go back and say, the most compelling thing that you can tell people is not like the issue they agree with, or even the action they have to take, although it's super important. It's just about you, yourself, your personal self. So you don't have to represent all, 30 million of whatever identity you are that exists in the United States. You have to represent yourself. And the best way that you can do that is to share a little bit about yourself. And a lot of leaders, particularly leaders on the left, particularly leaders that have been told for so much of their life to be quiet, and have for so long been made to defer to one kind of person and that same kind of person only, we're not always in the habit of telling our personal stories, and the things that have really maybe radicalized us, or the things that have really shined a light on something for us. We're not used to saying those things out loud. And that's what can make leadership and public communication so powerful for people. It's exactly the thing that we have been almost taught not to do, is the thing that we need to do, is solution to not being made into every one of your identity. It's really, actually, go ahead, get personal. Let people know why you are who you are.
Vicki, you want to add to that?
No, just that's very important in connecting with people. Once you connect with someone, that if you connect with them in some way through your own story, then you become a more credible source to them, and they are more likely to follow you as a leader, or agree with you as a leader, or come on board with your leadership team. Any of those things, once there's a connection made. And you cannot make a connection with somebody just by reciting the things that you all agree on policy-wise, right? You have to let them know that you're on their side through your own story, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk a lot about how in conversation, us being vulnerable allows other people to be vulnerable, gives them permission to be vulnerable, so we can connect better. Is the same true when somebody's speaking from the stage? If I get vulnerable, it makes somebody in the audience feel more receptive to listening, because now they have permission to go a little deeper into themselves?
Let me take that first. Yes, especially on the stage, because the first thing we tell people is to let yourself be vulnerable by opening up all of your body language. Show your whole body, your whole front of your body, your face, your eyes, all of that. Don't stand on the stage with your arms crossed, your hands in your pocket, none of that. Open yourself wide up like Michelle Obama taking the stage. And you know what happens when she comes out all open and wide and vulnerable? People swoon and fall in love with her because she is open and vulnerable. And that is another key to being a good leader, is that you open yourself up like that, literally with your body language, before you even get to the story.
And you can tell it's, we're hardwired to read body language. And so that's actually every engagement that we do. We spend our first unit or segment or whatever period of time we get to spend with them just talking about body language, what your body is saying, even when your words might be saying something different. So that opening up your body, that literal physical vulnerability, reads as confidence to the audience. Because you're signaling to people, you are not my enemy. Like Vicki was just saying earlier, you're not the predator. I'm not the prey. I'm here open and vulnerable. And you can do that with your body, and you can also do that with your stories. That's what really memorable, purposeful leadership looks like and feels like.
I love it. Let's talk about how that translates when the medium shifts. Obviously, you two have done a lot of preparing people for public speaking on the stage for big group events. In the last few months, that's been completely shut down, impossible. And now even seasoned media professionals are having to figure out how to do this from their bedroom while their kid screams outside or whatever, just for example. How are you talking to your people, to your leaders, and saying, even though you're hamstrung by these various constraints, here's how to get your message across? Or how is that pivoting? What are you seeing the trends going toward?
Well, I'll be vulnerable and honest and tell you this is unprecedented times, duh. But what that means is that nobody has all the answers. I don't have all the answers. Vicki doesn't have all the answers. But here we are, right? And we have to figure something out. And it's still as important as ever to be able to communicate with one another. Even in the deepest, darkest depths of the lockdown, we still yearned to communicate with each other. We were still, we still turned on the TV. We still needed the news, for example. And honestly, needed and still need leadership from people we consider leaders or supposed to be our leaders. So I don't have all the answers for it, but what we have seen is, as you're talking about the shift into the shift of the medium, is everyone is now on their laptops with their tiny, crappy laptop webcam, and with whatever lighting situation they think that they're stuck with. So we have had to shift almost entirely to Zoom and other platforms to talk to people about how they have to be in their own homes. In a way, it's as vulnerable as we can be. You are all looking into my kitchen, and you can see what I have and have not cleaned. You can see all of that. So all of us are in this bizarre, kind of awkward, certainly vulnerable moment, and we still have to communicate with each other, but in a way that many people are just not really used to. So we do a little bit in terms of talking about technique, lighting, camera, where to put things, how to breathe. We also have been talking with, so one of our upcoming clients is a conference. So that'll be the second conference we've worked with, where they've decided that the show must go on, but how? Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of content at this conference. So instead of just resigning yourself to everyone's like terrible lighting and weird silhouettes and, shaky cameras and bad whatever, we will be working with every single presenter on, okay, this is how we translate this is how we translate your training, this is how we translate your panel, this is how we translate your keynote in a way that's still engaging and won't be distracting. So there's a strategic element of this as well as a tips, techniques, and skills element. How do we shift is not just a small question of where to put your laptop, but is a question of what is the role of different media from now on.
Mm-hmm. It might be too deep of a question to just throw at you, and I apologize if so, but you're smart people and you can handle it. So because this is coming up for me as we talk about this, this could be such a great equalizer. It could also highlight disparities, right? When everybody has to communicate from their own, house or room. Where in certain ways everybody started from scratch of not knowing how to do this. In other ways, there are people who can, get a ring light and get all the best stuff and all that, really fast, and other folks that are still behind trying to figure out how to do it. Have you found that it's leaning more one way or the other, or is it a combination of both?
There's different disparities, and they're obvious when I say them, but you wouldn't expect it if you didn't know there's going to be a pandemic. So one of our organizations has been telecommuting exclusively its entire existence, right? It's a fully telecommuting organization. They know what they're doing about that kind of stuff. I don't have to work with them about that. So it's a different focus there. We have one organization where it's a convener of many different organizations. So I expect that we'll be able to see that. So the newer organizations seem to be more nimble and more adaptive to this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Older organizations that have either never even thought of having their staff work remotely or have actively resisted calls to do so, which is a whole other thing I don't want to get started with, find themselves behind because of course they do. They refuse to adapt. So they did so before they were called on it. And so now that it's an emergency, it's a little bit slower. But that's not really the disparity I think you're talking about. We do work. So when we say we work with people of color and women and LGBT folks, we mostly work with executives and entire organizations. So in this, we see organizational disparities. The organizations that are big and have money and have been thinking about technology and have been already prioritizing supporting their staff are doing better, because they think immediately about, how do we make sure that we continue to communicate? How do we continue to foster a productive culture? The organizations that have been more cash strapped, or that just don't have access to resources, the ability to, hire somebody to say, well, how are we going to do this? For them, we find that we have to think about different solutions. And this is actually also true before the pandemic. The kind of organizations we want to serve don't always have the kind of budgets that allow them to do long engagements or do whatever else. And so what we found, and this is kind of, there's a parallel here in the pandemic. What we found before the pandemic, we're like, well, maybe the best way to do this is get a bunch of you together, and we'll serve you all. It actually doesn't cost us much more to do a group of 4 than it does a group of 1. And we want to do this. Like, let's do this. Like, let's go. I think in the pandemic, the impulse to cancel conferences without thinking about going digital is going to be something that will ultimately be seen as very negative. I think the organizations that see themselves as conveners are the ones who, because we're able to pull resources together to come together, those are the organizations that will actually serve people in this moment right now, because not every organization can come together. Not every organization thought about getting all of their staff laptops with cameras before the pandemic. And if you're not used to thinking about that, or if you don't have the resources for that, you have to rely on a larger community. So I think the equalizers will be the conveners, the people who have a broad tent or a broad sort of like place where people can get together. Unfortunately, some of the smaller organizations, I think that they're just going to go away, and we'll never have the chance to see them. So, especially some of the new ones. But I don't know, everyone is in that boat in one way or another.
Well, right. And I mean, this is in business, in advocacy, in politics, in life. When something like this happens, right, you see people that go away immediately. You see people that find opportunity and really, go up in a way that's kind of antithetical to what everybody else is experiencing. Yeah. And then you see people that kind of just limp along and do their best, to get through it. I know you're obviously talking to your clients about how to be proactive and be, how can we find opportunities and how can we communicate in different ways and really grab attention here. When you're thinking about your own business, you guys did scaling school in the fall, back before any of this was an issue. So we weren't talking about any of this when we were coaching you guys. When you think about like how you've adapted your business and then how you're also advising people to adapt, I mean, that's a lot. How do you balance all of those things together?
Yeah.
Balance?
Balance?
Balance. What is this balance?
What is this balance? I'm sure you can attest to this, but there is a lot of trial and error, because I think we're smart people, and Vicki and I will get on the phone. We might not even have a client schedule that week, but we're still on the phone every day talking about like, all right, well, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? How do we reach out to people? Is this really important? Is this the best thing to do? And we're not always right. And in fact, I would even say, particularly at the beginning, we were not even often right. And that's okay. I don't know that there are better ways to learn than trying something out, seeing how it worked out, and then learning from the result. And I think the same thing is true for our clients. At first, the cycle that we saw with our clients, because we ran up against a bit of a brick wall, right? So our whole thing is we are public leadership, public communication. When the pandemic eliminates the public piece of all of that, we still need communication, we still need leadership, but everyone is suddenly in a moment of crisis. What that meant for us in our business is it translated into, we had our most successful month ever in March, and then we hit a brick wall suddenly, right? So Vicki was saying this earlier, like it's not going from 0 to 60, it's going from 60 to 0, and then figuring this stuff out. So it also took a bit of patience with our clients. We had people, some of them were in the middle of an engagement, and fortunately, I think it's because we picked really great people, and we are able to have very honest conversations with them, and they're able to say, we were scheduled to go to DC, or we're scheduled to go to Atlanta, or we're scheduled to go wherever we're supposed to go. We can't do that right now. And I'm going to be very honest, like, I don't know how this works online, so give us some time and we'll figure out how to complete this contract, or we'll figure out that we need to take a break. Whatever we do, we just want to produce, we want to give you the thing that you need for support. And on the other side, they come back to us with a similar conversation, like, you know what, I'm not going to be on TV, or I'm not going to this conference. So this can't be a priority right now. Let me take care of my people. Let me see what it's going to do for my budget. And then we'll come back to this. And I honestly did not know a month ago, 2 months ago, I would say, if we were going to get any of these people back. And slowly, one by one, we're seeing them again. We just started one of my favorite engagements. We just restarted this Monday. And she sent us another lead to a client who actually we approached a year ago, and now they're ready for us. And I think this isn't the exact answer to your question, but it's one of the things you talk about in scaling school, about leading with integrity. There's no point in doing this work if you don't have integrity. And also it's good for business. We can keep our clients if they know that we have their best interests at heart.
Yes, absolutely. And I just love that, putting one foot in front of the other and having faith and giving back. And again, connecting with your own why on just keeping it through. Sometimes I feel like the first step is deciding on an outcome before you know a how, right? We say we can't do how till we know what and why. But sometimes it's, I'm gonna get up on stage and the audience is gonna love me, and I don't know how, but I know that's what's gonna happen. Or I know that I'm gonna stay in business or even grow my business this year, and I don't know how, but I'm deciding that that's what's going to happen. And when I decide that and I anchor on that mentally, now I'm kind of ready to do whatever it takes to make sure that that's true.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you might not be right the first time, but you'll figure it out.
But you'll get there if you want to get there, and that's the outcome that you're anchored on. So thank you so much, Arshad and Vicki. It's been so wonderful having you both. And when we, as we post this, you guys can definitely put your link below, and so everybody can call you if they want help with their communications needs, or figuring out how to take yourself from in-person communications to how do I translate this online, and how do I still do what I want to do and get my message out there. These are your people. Call Arshad and Vicki, Convey Communications. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful having you today.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you for having us.
It's great to see you today.
Yeah.
And hugs, guys.
Yeah, hugs.
Each other in person again soon. Bye.